button on your lower panel. You may see it on the slide right now. So please select either English or French channel for the language in which you wish to listen to the conversations today. And so while you are selecting, I will introduce myself. My name is Nadezhda, and I'm part of the ETF Quality Assurance and Governance team. I hope you managed to select the channel. And now let me give you some technical instructions for today before we start. You can see them now on the slides. First of all, please turn off your microphone to avoid interference. But of course, you are very welcome to leave your videos on so we can see each other. The chat will be our main tool for communication today. So please use it for questions, for comments. You can write both in English and in French. We will take all the questions, all your comments during the questions and answers sessions later today. And in your questions, could you please write who you wish to address your question to? Please also note that our webinar today is recorded, and the recording will be disseminated and used for communication purposes of the European Training Foundation. You have all signed your consent for the recording. However, in case you have not agreed to the use of the recording, we recommend that you continue to take part in the webinar, but without your video. And the last piece of technical information, could you please modify your login name so that it could show your country, your name and your surname. You can see the instructions, how to do it right on the screen. So you just go to participants, then you find your name there, and then you click on more, and then rename. So could you please change the login so that it would show your country, name, and surname? And it will just help all of us to know who is who, because we are already more than 60 people, and I think more people are joining. So I hope that you can hear us and see us. And now I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Munir Bati, Senior Expert of the ETF Quality Assurance team, for introducing the topic and the speakers of today. Munir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and very warm welcome to all of you, and in particular to the ETF forum members. I can see various countries are there: Turkey, Armenia, Moldova, Georgia, Morocco, Tunisia, Albania, Montenegro, and I'm sure I'm missing some others. So happy to see you all, and happy to see you participating with us in this webinar dedicated to assessment of teachers and trainers' performance. And I mean, the question is, why have we selected this theme, and why is it assessment of teachers and trainers? Why is it the quality assurance measure, actually? If you think about teachers and trainers, and you think about this VET policy area, you can address it from different perspectives. You can think on how teachers are being prepared and recruited and hired, how they are retained. And it seems that according to OECD study, there are some problems in retaining teachers and trainers in VET system in many developed countries. It's about as well continuous professional development, but as well about assessment of their performance. And we selected this area of assessment of performance of teachers and trainers because we think that much is being done about continuous professional development. There's a lot of studies about that, but there are very few on why and how teachers and trainers' performance is being assessed. So most of us think that teachers and trainers are central to vocational education and training systems. They are at the core of the system. VET programs are changing. they need to adapt to labor market needs, to evolving labor market needs, and that teachers not only need to adapt as well their knowledge and acquire new knowledge about the new labor market needs, but as well adapt new approaches of teaching and learning. And we may have seen during the pandemic last year and this year that most of that system have jumped to e-learning and asking teachers and trainers to rapidly adapt their training and learning modalities to this new approach of online learning, which is very much challenging for them. On the other hand, most of the ETF partner countries are engaging in reforming their VET systems. They are adopting new approaches, modular systems, outcome learning-based systems, engaging in work-based learning and apprenticeship schemes, and all these new approaches are impacting heavily the way how teachers are performing. And not only the system are relying on teachers to implement those reforms, but there is a need to know how they are performing. Are they implementing really the reforms? How they are dealing in the classroom? How they are delivering the training to the students and learners? So it is crucial for the VET systems to know how teachers are performing, because this will inform us or from them about how successful are their reforms and whether they're implemented as they have been designed. So that's why assessment of teachers and trainers is very important, not only to know how teachers are coping with the new reforms, but as well how they are delivering them, how they are implementing the newly designed courses based on these new approaches and methodologies. So for that reason, we decided to look at assessment of teachers and trainers. And we are looking at it from this perspective. We've asked a couple of colleagues, one from a newer member state, which is from Romania, and we will introduce her later on, and another experience from one ETF member country, which is Morocco. How do they deal with the assessment of teachers and trainers? And we've asked them to address a selected number of questions. What mechanisms are in place to assess teachers and trainers' performance? How do they do that? There are different approaches, different mechanisms, different tools, and we ask them to let us know how do they do to assess teachers and trainers' performance. Secondly, what do they do with the results of this assessment? Does it serve to design continuous professional development? Does it serve for promotion issues? Does it have any other purposes? So what do they do with the results of that? And another question was on bearing in mind that last year, teachers and trainers were asked to embark on this online training or delivering training through online tools, and most of them were not that prepared for that. We asked them as well to reflect on this. How did they assess the preparedness, but as well the performance of teachers in delivering courses through this new modality? So this is how we shaped the agenda of today. And we will start with a first presentation from an ETF colleague, Eva Yansova. Eva will share with us the outcomes of a survey we did a couple of years ago about CPD and assessment. So many countries have participated in this survey, and Eva will share with us the outcomes of this survey. Then we will move to the presentation of Romania, and then the presentation of Morocco. I encourage you to put your thoughts and questions, and as Nadia just said, if you address one question, please let us know who's addressing this question to by using the chat. Thank you very much, and hope we will have fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Munir. So I'm passing the floor to Eva Yansova for her presentation. Over to you, Eva. Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Munir. So as Munir said, to set the scene and to prepare the floor for the presentation of our two colleagues from Romania and Morocco to provide more details on the assessment of teachers, I would like to share with you few selected findings from the survey that we ran in 2018 and 2019 on continuing professional development of teachers and trainers. Now, the focus of this survey was, of course, on the continuing professional development. As Munir said, this is the topic that is researched quite well, but we also included some other elements, and we asked on issues related to the work of the teachers and also the assessment of the teachers. So I will provide now few data to set the scene and provide some key information on the assessment of teachers in the selected partner countries that we involved in this study. So I will try to move the slide. Yes, now it works. Wonderful. So first of all, I will provide some information on the survey so that you know from where we took actually these data. So the ETF survey of PET teachers and trainers, as well as principals, which I explain in a while, focused on, let's say, collection of different topics. The main objective was to examine and compare the state of provision of continuing professional development for vocational teachers and trainers. The two target groups where, let's say, where we focused on. The first target group were teachers and trainers, and the second one were principals. So we collected information about the teachers and trainers, but also about the schools and the management. The main topics that we covered in the survey were various working conditions, mentoring, induction, participation in CPD, which I mentioned already, provision of feedback, approaches to teaching, curriculum assessment, as well as career and job mobility. The survey was implemented in 9 countries in 2018-2019, and the countries were the following. It was Algeria, Albania, Belarus, Kosovo, Republic of Moldova, Montenegro, Serbia, Tunisia, and Turkey. Let's say, asked, or we included in the study all teachers and trainers and schools in some of the countries, and in other we used actually a random sample to arrive to representative results. So what are, let's say, the key findings related to the assessment, to the appraisal and feedback? And I will also touch some issues related to the CPD, which is actually a related issue. So first of all, what we could draw from the results of the survey is that appraisal and feedback for teachers play an important role in schools. And we see that in most of the countries, we see that actually teachers are provided with feedback regularly, at least once per year. So here you can see a graph or representation of the results to the question on how often is each teacher formally appraised in the school by the following people. And this also drives us to the conclusion that actually it's the principals and other school managers that are most likely to provide feedback to the teachers. However, we have some countries, such as, for example, Moldova and Serbia, where, interestingly, it's the mentor who also plays an important and active role in the provision of feedback and in the appraisal. Now, what are, let's say, the common, let's say, methods or approaches to the assessment? It's usually the observation and analysis of students' test scores that are reported as, let's say, the most common parts of the formal appraisal of teachers. But we have some countries, for example, Algeria, Tunisia, or Turkey, where actually the respondents pointed to quite a prominent use
of discussions of teachers' self-assessments. So a bit more, let's say, active approach. So we see actually from these results that teachers are regularly provided with feedback, and they are assessed in terms of, let's say, their teaching and needs. What we could also see from the results is that the appraisal and feedback aim to support teachers' development, and that's actually very positive. So feedback and appraisal is used not for, let's say, sanctions and kind of restrictive measures, but they are actually aimed to develop the teachers' skills and needs. So what we could see from the results that in most of the countries and among most of the teachers, there is a tendency to develop a training plan or development plan for each teacher. So we can see, for example, that in the 92% of the schools in Belarus or 75% of schools in Serbia, this is the case. A development and training plan is developed for each teacher. But what is also positive, that in some countries, for example, again, Belarus or Moldova, it's also the mentor that is appointed to help the teacher to improve his or her teaching. So this is the support that is given to the teachers to, let's say, to tackle the weaknesses and gaps. However, also sanctions and dismissal happen, although very rarely. We could see that 38% of the schools, for example, in Algeria, or 31% of schools in Belarus, reported actually the use of sanctions or dismissal in case of poor performance. So, to actually support then the teachers with the provision of the training, we move to, let's say, the second issue, and it's the participation in continuing professional development among vet teachers and trainers. That, according to our survey, is relatively high. So we see that in most of the countries, except with the exception of, let's say, Algeria or to some extent also Tunisia, most of the teachers actually participate in some kind of CPD every year. So these results actually show the participation rate of teachers in different kinds of CPD within the past 12 months. So the best performer here is actually Serbia, where 94% of teachers reported participation in such training. What we could also see from the analysis, from the comparative analysis, that there is a regulative framework defining entitlement and minimum requirements in most of the countries. However, let's say there are some differences in terms of duration and participation. We see that most of the teachers participated in conferences, seminar, in contrast to actually training in business premises, which, however, for example, happen quite often in Turkey. So there are differences among countries. Another thing which I would like to mention is the duration, because most of the training actually is quite short. Most of the respondents reported the training of below 30 hours. Now, the participation in CPD also happen actually in the schools. So we can also conclude from the survey that most schools provide school-based CPD. We have we saw that actually induction training or mentoring to new teachers was provided in more than 70% of the surveyed schools. Schools are also expected to develop a training plan for teachers and to organize school-based training in most countries. So this is also reflected in our results. However, there is a very often lack of budget and capacities actually to be able to provide such school-based CPD. Here I also included some graph on the participation in mentoring, where we can see that many teachers actually are provided currently by mentors or were active or have been active as mentor in the past. However, what is important that many teachers actually are not provided by support and specific training on becoming a mentor. What is then important also for the assessment and the follow-up of the assessment, and also it's important also for the CPD participation, that or development or let's say dealing with gaps, weaknesses among teachers is not connected with opportunities to carry out, enhance, or leadership functions. And it's in general not connected with incentives of material or non-material nature. And this is reported actually by most of the teachers across many countries. I would pick, for example, Tunisia, Turkey, or Algeria, where more than 60% of the teachers reported such lack of incentives. So to conclude, what we could draw related to the assessment and also the CPD, that we could see that appraisal or feedback to teachers is provided regularly, but not always followed by specific support to address actually the weaknesses. Then also the assessment of teachers' needs is not always comprehensive and is limited, and this is also related to the fact that or to possible, let's say, challenge that CPD priorities are usually decided at the central level, and when it comes to the training provision, it's assessed by independent bodies. But usually the focus is on formal requirement vis-a-vis the evaluation of substance or the relevance of the training. And finally, element related to the CPD provision, that impact of the CPD on the quality of teachings is very rarely addressed. And that's very important when we speak about the assessment of teachers' development and also the training or a support that is given to the teachers. And I would stop here, and I would ask also Nadia whether there are some questions or comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eva. I think we will take the questions after the presentation of Dana. May I please ask you to put the link to the survey to the chat so that participants could access the survey from the web page of ETF.
It's done, Nadia.
Excuse me, Munir?
I did it. It's there.
Oh, you have done it. Yes. Okay, great. So you can see that Munir has posted the link to the survey ETF web page. Okay, so thanks, Eva, for setting the scene for further presentations with this overview from 9 countries. And I would now like to pass the floor to Dana Stroje for presenting the practice of Romania in assessing teachers and trainers. And I'm very pleased to say that Dana is the Deputy Director of the National Center for TVET Development of the Ministry of Education of Romania. And Dana is also involved in the development of initial VET and VET strategy in her country. And she is also an active member of several working and advisory groups at the European level, such as the Directors General for VET, Advisory Committee for VET, and also the Steering Committee of the European Quality Assurance Network for VET, and several other groups. So I'm very pleased to pass the floor to Dana for her presentation.
Oh, thank you, Nadia. I'm trying to share the screen. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for introducing me. So I'm happy to present how things are done in Romania to the whole lot of participants. Actually, things are not done very differently to the common way of assessing teachers and trainers' performance, and it's very much following the lines that were described previously by the colleague, by my colleague. So in Romania. In Romania, most of the activities that are procedural, and that includes the assessment of teachers and trainers, is based on specific documentations that's coordinated by the Quality Assurance and Evaluation Commission, which exists in each VET provider, in each school. And of course, being aware that teachers and tutors are the main pillar and the most important part for the quality assurance of the whole teaching process, an important part is allocated to their preparation and support, but also to the assessment and the follow-up procedures. I have a number of slides which I will not further detail, but I thought it might be useful for the understanding of the whole process later on for people who might be interested in how it's done in Romania. So there is a whole lot of legislation that is in place. It's mainly done at national level. Romania is probably many of the participant countries, a quite centralized system. So opposed to other EU members, it's not so decentralized. That's why a set of regulations are done at national level. They specify how assessment is done and followed up. And
Dana, may I please interrupt you for a second? Could you please share your full screen so that we could see the slides better? Just full screen modality. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So you had here the legislative framework where the most important procedures and legislation is mentioned. Is just for your information. And this is a slide which we think it's important because as everything in quality, it's quality assured, so it follows the PDCA cycle plan, do, check, act. So this assessment of teachers is also following this cycle. And what I would underline here is what we evaluate, the evaluation domains. So you have here the list of the evaluation domains, designing the teaching activity, implementation of the teaching and learning and evaluation of learning outcomes process in relation with the students. Then we have assessment of class management, monitoring and counseling of students, teaching career management, contribution to institutional development, to which degree the teacher is involved in the whole institution development and improvement, and ethical conduct of teacher. The evaluation of teachers, but also of auxiliary teaching staff, it's done as it was previously mentioned. I think it's a general rule because the pillar of everything is self-assessment. That includes the teacher's assessment. So the pillar is the self-assessment of the teachers, and it's following a procedure where based on the self-assessment forms, the coordinators of each methodological area in combination with the directors, they set up the performance indicators and agree or do not agree, or so make their own assessment of teachers' performance. And then the two assessments, the self-assessment made by the teachers and the assessment made by this commission of leaders of the VET providers discuss. There is a discussion, and there is an agreement in most cases of a final evaluations that is made by the board of directors in the presence of the teacher, who can further argue the wording of the score of self-assessment and present additional evidence of his activity to support his own self-assessment if the case. So the basis for supporting both processes of self-assessment and assessment of the teachers is a portfolio. Maybe that's very common also. That includes a lot of documents. These were initially in the first years when we introduced quality assurance, it was all printed in paper, and there were huge lots of papers produced, and it was a lot of bureaucracy involved. Currently, they are all done electronically, and they include all these curriculum planning, evaluation tools, monitoring of action plan, satisfaction assessment, questionnaires, and data, inter-assistance among teachers, and so on. And they are all embedded. The conclusions of all this evidence is embedded in the self-assessment report. Of course, I have listed here many other components of the dossier that is forming the teacher's portfolio. There are also, because there is a case that many teachers have different responsibilities at school level or at national level, for example, being involved in curricular development or in the national exams, or there are inter-assistance among teachers, and then they have observation. There are teachers who develop textbooks or didactic materials, and all these kind of papers are supporting the self-assessment that the teacher is doing. So that would be regarding how it's done in the process of assessing the teachers. And now this slide presents what it's done after the evaluation of teachers. So as it was it's very much related to what was said before me by my colleague who presented the general conclusions of the 9 countries questionnaires. There is a CPD plan in place. And it can be personalized in the form of the teachers being recommended to participate in the teaching classes of other colleagues. This is a case for newcomers or for teachers with lower self-assessment degrees to go to assist teachers with higher experience. They can also participate in different activities organized by the county school inspectorate or participate in training courses. As a final result, if it is a case that the teacher's performance is highly rated, then the teachers can get bonus salary. This is depending on how high his score is. It varies from 10% up to 20% of his annual income. So you have here, just for information, the legislation in place for awarding extra financial support, extra financial sums for teachers who are very well placed in the awarding scale, and also the methodology that's in place. Currently, it has been raised, and the highest financial additional sum represents 25% of the basic salary for the last 5 years for the teacher. And actually, in order to get this extra money, there is a procedure and a set of criteria and assessment grids that are set up at national level, because as I initially told you, in Romania, most of these kind of regulations are done at national level. Okay, this is not so important. So now I would like to detail a little bit how this assessment of teachers the assessment of teachers is reflective in the quality assurance methodology that is implemented and done at the provider level. So in our countries, there is a procedure that is followed up annually related to the quality assurance process at school level. And there are a lot of descriptors that are looked after, and part of them are related to the teachers. And you have in the following slides a number of quality descriptors that are related to the assessment of teachers. For example, I have here the indicator of professional development of teachers. And and then we can for the professional development of teachers, there are a set of descriptors that are used, and you can see the columns that are included that present the descriptors, what it's done and how it's done, who is in charge of the whole process, and also which are the improvement proposals. So these are a different kind of quality descriptors and indicators, and you have in these slides a detailed presentation on what it's asked, how it's done, who is in charge, and what is a consequence in terms of improvement suggestions. For example, here the improvement is to organize a methodological activity, learning based on the student needs. And it's in connection with the quality descriptors that's saying about the observation of activity and feedback from students and colleagues. In particular connection with this slide, I would just like to underline that Romania does not currently have in place a very systematic procedure of collecting feedback from students. Because when we introduced quality assurance in the system, it was not very well received by teachers, the idea of being assessed by students. Although it was tried to be implemented, it was not very successful. But time has come now that it was decided at ministerial levels that this will be one of the pillars of the assessment of teachers in near future. So methodological guidelines are now under development, and it is foreseen that in the next school year, feedback from students will be one of the main components of teachers' assessment. This is a shift in the way we perceive teachers' evaluation, because it was very much it was a quite complicated debate with trade unions and because it's in a way the idea that the teacher is the owner of his class and of his teaching process. And it was not felt that the feedback from students can bring adequate added value. But finally, it's concluded that students can give on certain aspects, not in all, not in scientific one, not in others, but in some points, they have very relevant perspectives. So this is important because I think it's an improvement in the way teachers will be assessed in Romania. As relates to the participation in CPD programs and use of acquired experience, I have to confess that on my personal opinion, and I underline that it's my personal opinion, it's a medium level of quality in this CPD. I say medium because the good part is that we have many national CPD programs in place that are offered at the local level to teachers on various aspects of interest. And it is compulsory to have CPDs. There is a number of hours that's compulsory for each teacher to have across 5 years, and this is compulsory for them to have. But there is not a very good feedback on how it's done at and how it's done and followed up in the classroom. Also, currently, the new self-assessment, procedure for VET providers had put in place some criteria related to following up how CPD of teachers is embedded in their teaching and learning process in the classroom. So things are improving in a way, and it's important to underline this. Now another component about which I would like to draw your attention is a new development that that was introduced very recently in Romania and is part of a wider European EU approach on digitization. It's a tool that's called SELFIE, which is a self-reflection tool for VET schools and companies. And it's in connection to assess the capacity of the school to use and to provide support for digital technology. And we are not yet in the situation of fully applying this instrument, but we have tested it in 26 VET schools. And we have in perspective the idea and the hope that in future all VET schools will use SELFIE. So just a few words about what SELFIE is. It's a questionnaire that's addressing 4 components of the VET process. So it's looking at the management team, then it's taking the perspective of the teachers, then the perspective of the students, and finally the perspective of the companies on how the digitization is developed and used in the teaching, learning, and assessment of students' process. So actually, as in connection with the teachers, specifically for the teachers, these SELFIE questionnaires ask the teachers about the utilization of digital platform, utilization of open educational resources, elaboration of open educational resources, involvement of students in a teaching process that uses digital tools. But also there are questions related to the extent to which the school, the providers, is supportive for the teachers in their use of digital technologies. And what's very important also to mention is that SELFIE also has a component for work-based learning. So specifically for the component of work-based learning, which is coming more into discussion in most VET countries. So very, very shortly, this would be my presentation. And of course, going back to the, not the last, but the before last slide, what the conclusion is that teachers think that there are too many papers in assessing their performance, and students think that increasing their voice is crucial. So that's what we are trying to do, both to reduce the number of paper and to put them into electronic formats, and to increase the voice of students by developing platforms of students' feedback related to teachers' performance. So thank you so much. If you have questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Dana. And thanks a lot, Eva. Definitely from the number of questions we have in the chat, it means that your presentations have created a lot of interest in participants. So I'm now opening for questions and comments, and I will try to take them from the chat and group them together by, let's say, common topic. So first of all, Faisal is asking Eva, or rather it's a reflection from Faisal, who says that he thinks that CPD itself is an incentive for VET trainers to enhance their competencies. So what are the answers expected from respondents in the survey to the question about the incentives to participate in the CPD course? Eva.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. I will try to quickly comment on that. I mean, it's true, of course, that we have the teachers actually are motivated through the way that they can participate in the continuing professional development. However, there is also a recognition of the need that to, let's say, spend time and sometimes their money, they also want to get something in return. And in the long term, there is a recognition that there is a need actually to get feedback and some rewards afterwards. And this is especially important because you can see the decreasing participation rates with age. So older teachers are less likely to participate in CPD. So I would comment in this way. So you have some cases or examples where actually the participation and active approach to development is also rewarded in material and non-material ways. And I would now pass the floor to Nadia.
Thank you very much, Eva. There is another question from Faisal for Dana. So Dana, how can you carry out the same type of evaluation to teachers by the board of directors, knowing the huge number of teachers? And what is the frequency to evaluate each teacher? And this is also linked to the question of Christine, who is asking, are all teachers, theoretical and practical, evaluated in the same way with their portfolio? And would you consider a biannual evaluation instead of an annual one? So over to you, Dana. Your microphone.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah. Theoretically, the evaluation is done on an annual basis, but it's true that because it's a quality assurance process, and the whole description that I've made is in place in Romania for more than 14 years. In schools that have well-established teams of teachers, it's accepted that sometimes it's done on once in 2 years, and not every year, where there are no changes in teachers and no changes in no major changes. I don't think this is a problem for the because it's not just the director that's involved. It's also the head of. So, for example, if you have mathematics, that is a head of this discipline, or if you have technologies, that is a head of discipline and a person who's helping the head. So for each set of discipline, there is another subcommission. So the director is only having the final say, but there are also subcommittees that are doing the process, and it's evolving the whole year. It's based on evaluation, on assisting at the teaching and learning process. So it's not done at the end. It's a process that's on ongoing basis. And having the support of these subcommissions, I think it's doable. And also because it's not annually in all cases currently.
Thank you.
In terms of being the same, yes, the main criteria, like for example, the support for students or participation in CPD, these are general criteria that are the same for theoretical teachers, mathematics, language, so on, and for technological teachers. But then how you further detail them in indicators and sub-indicators, it can be specific. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Dana. There is also a number of questions for you related to the opinions of students. So we have questions from Stella, from Ekrem, and from Rakia, and they're asking what is the pupils' and parents' role in the assessment of teachers, and so is there one evaluation foreseen to gather the opinions of students? And Ekrem is also asking, can students assess their teachers objectively? Could giving a note to a teacher who graded themselves turn into their revenge?
Yeah, that was the that were never-ending discussion on this topic in Romania, because as I told you, we are an ex-communist country. We have with us to carry the whole history of many things that were tough in time. So yeah, of course, this was the trade unions' main perspective, that students are not in the position of assessing teachers. But in the same time, discussing together with student councils, they are right in saying that students can very well assess other components, not the scientific component, not the technical component, and they don't actually give grades on these components. But in many cases, teachers is a role model for a student, and these components that take into account the psychological component, the way he is conducting his students, and to the extent to which he can be a model for them, can be very well assessed, and it can make a difference from one teacher to another. We have done this using ECAVET grants on a pilot basis, because usually in Romania what you do is you have an initiative, you pilot on a number of schools, and if it's successful, then you adapt, and if you have to revise and make a methodology, then it's implemented at national scale. So what we have done, we did that on a smaller scale. Now we are collecting, because what we can see is that nowadays students are quite shy. They are not afraid, but maybe shy in presenting things that they don't like. It's not only in teachers, but in generally in school. And we are trying ways to encourage them to be honest and to have a say. So what it's now decided at ministerial level is that there will be a national decision to involve all students in all schools, not only that, but all schools in the assessment of specific components. As I said, not all.
I see. Thank you very much, Dana, for a very complete response. We have another question from Kuhn for you. Kuhn says that according to OECD research, it's very beneficial that teachers and trainers work in teams. What is the situation in Romania about this?
Yeah, that's funny that teachers in maybe not only in Romania were not very used to work in team, because they used to see each other as a competitor. And that was another shift that we had to make, and it's been a lot of work done, including CPD. There were specific CPDs encouraging and teaching teachers to learn in teams and to learn from each other. And now we have put in place procedures for peer learning, and we intend to make in place procedures for peer review of teachers. But I have to admit that it's not easy, because we are not in a culture where sharing among teachers is common. We have gone a long way. As I said, we have implemented quality assurance since 15 years ago, and we have gone a far way. To explain you to which extent, to where we started and where we are now. In 15 years ago, teacher was by his own. He did not have any kind of he had a very limited cooperation with others. Inspectors were like kings, and ministerial people were like emperors. And commonly, and on a continuous process that's done in the last 15 years, currently we have 16 networks of vet schools on specific, for example, all the schools in agriculture, or schools in I don't know what, in catering. They are grouped in clusters, and they organize peer learning activities where school teachers from all these domains participate, and they share documents, papers, and understanding. So on my own opinion, a long way has been done so far, and we still hope for improvements.
Thank you very much, Dana. And I'm now passing the floor to Munir for taking the questions from our French speaking participants. Over to you, Munir. Have I missed any questions from the French speaking guests?
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you very much, Dana. I mean, for those of you that don't know Dana, Dana is actually an ETF. It's a friend of us. It's not colleague. She's a friend of ETF, and we've been working together in many other events. No, I think that you most of the questions have been addressed. I have two in mind that I would like to address to Dana, and which is about the self-assessment of the teachers and trainers. You said that the first step of evaluation starts with the self-assessment. And we all know that self-assessment is not an easy task. And in the beginning, people are quite reluctant to self-reflect on their own performance. So were there any preparation, any support provided to teachers to do the self-assessment? And another question is how the whole system of evaluation of teachers' performance is perceived by teachers themselves.
Yes, so thank you, Munir. Thank you for your kind words. Yes, I really am in my soul a very dear friend of the ETF world, because I've cooperated so many across time with you all. So sorry. So initially you asked me about self-assessment. Yeah, there is when we introduced quality assurance procedures, we had like 4 or 5 years of continuous professional development of teachers to support the quality assurance process. And one of the trainings that we have done for teachers, because we have done at that time trainings for teachers, for the staff, management staff, for companies, and so on. And one of the components of the teachers training in related to quality assurance was how to develop self-assessment of their own, because we start all self-assessment at school level with a self-assessment of teachers. So that's how we build up. We have self-assessment of teachers, then we go on teams, and then we build up at the whole institution. So yeah, that's been a very good, I think, training for the teachers. And what we do when we implement this kind of national strategies is that, as I told you, we always pilot the trainings for a small number. We check how it works, we revise the training, and then we make a training course that's adapted and it's revised, and we can have it for the national level. And what we do then, we distribute it to our region. In each region, we have a house of teachers development, and we have their trainers, and we train the trainers, and the trainers deliver the training to the teachers. So yeah, that's how we have done. And of course, that was 15 years ago, and since then teachers came in the system, so we do it periodically according to the needs of teachers. And your second question, can you remind it to me?
It's about the perception of the evaluation system by teachers. How do they perceive that? How do they look at that?
Because evaluation of teachers always existed in Romania, but before quality assurance was in place, it was even tougher, because I told you it was the inspectors and the ministerial staff had an even the role of evaluating, not of guiding the teachers. It was even tougher before. But now things are better for them, because the evaluation also has a supportive role, and it's not done in the idea in a bad sense. It's trying to support and improve their performance, and it was well received. The problem was that we had 2 categories of teachers. Some of them who are self-assessing them less than their real performance, because it's like in real life. There are persons who tend to under-evaluate their performance, and others who tend to over-evaluate. And it was very difficult to have the right measures in place. But I think we have gone quite a long way, and now people quite know what their place is in the whole system, because when you say in criteria and indicators, you can perceive them differently and assess yourself in a different way.
Thank you very much, Dana, and thanks again also to Eva for the presentations, for responses. I am inviting all participants to continue using the chat. We will have another questions and answers session in the end of the webinar. But now I'm very happy to welcome our next speakers from Morocco. So I'm now giving the floor to Rakia El Mahmoudi from the Ministry of Education, Vocational Training, Higher Education and Scientific Research of Morocco. And Rakia is also the national contact person for Morocco in the ETF Forum for Quality Assurance. Rakia, over to you for presenting your colleagues who will be the speakers and for the presentations.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour les membres.
Thank you so much. Thank you and good morning to ETF. Thank you and good morning to the organizers. I'm a member of the Forum for Quality Assurance, and in particular, we have created our own association for quality assurance. And today, I would like to share with you some information about trainers' assessment. And it is not me who's going to make the presentation. We have two colleagues who are going to do that. We have Laila, in particular, vocational training from the vocational training department, and she is an expert in vocational training, and she works on site in particular, and she is also in charge of monitoring the training programs for trainers for vocational training. And she is also in charge of follow-up of the training. We also have Zainab from the Department of Pedagogy and Communication. And that Zainab will be the second speaker. She has already participated in the webinar. She's with us today, and she has lots of experience in vocational training. And in particular, she works for the Agency for Vocational Training and Work Promotion of Morocco. And this is the most important agency in Morocco, and they are in charge of the assessment of continuing training and the skills of trainers. So I give the floor to Laila first for a general presentation, and then Zainab will take the floor in particular and speak about the assessments and monitoring of the vocational training of teachers. Good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in this webinar and present to you the situation of Morocco. First of all, I would like to give you some information about the background of vocational training in Morocco. There are many stakeholders. We have providers from the public sectors. In particular, we have the OFPPT, the Office for Vocational Training and Employment Promotion. We also have Ministerial Trainers Department, and they provide training in tourism, agriculture, fishing, health, national mutual aid, and so on and so forth. We also have the IGD, so Delegated Management Institutes, and they are in charge of all the management issues when it comes to vocational training. We also have vocational training providers from the private sector. We do apologize, but the sound is really unclear. So from the private sector, we have private vocational training institutions and also other providers. In terms of vocational training, so we have different systems, multiple systems for accessing trainer roles. And there is no national benchmark for the assessment, motivation, and promotion of trainers. So each training provider assesses its own trainers. And in particular, when it comes to the OFPPT, we have the skills development centers involved in the skills assessment, and my colleague will talk about that. So in terms of vocational training, there is a centralized organization at the Department for Vocational Training, which is responsible for the monitoring. Now, next slide. Here you see some indicators about the current situation of trainers. You see the number of trainers per training provider. And then you have information about the type of trainers, so if it is a permanent or temporary. Then you have a breakdown according to gender, sector, age group, public or private sector, trainer, student ratio. So here you see some indicators. So the total number of trainers is more than 21,000. In terms of breakdown, permanent temporary trainers, it is basically 50-50. Breakdown according to gender, at national level, 31% of the workforce is represented by women. Age groups, 80% of trainers are under 50 years of age. In terms of qualifications, you see 47% have a higher education diploma and the same number a university degree. Next slide, please. In order to guarantee the assessment of trainers, many studies, investigations have been carried out, and the results are the following. The recruitment criteria for the permanent staff are properly defined in the public and private sector. The CDCs have been created by the OFPPT. So the
Laila, do you hear us? Because we have lost you for a second. Laila, could you please just repeat the last five seconds, because we your image was frozen.
Et donc, je m'excuse, je crois qu'il y avait une coupure. Donc,
I do apologize. So in terms of results, so there is a lack of tools and indicators based on output and performance, and limited mechanisms for motivation and promotion of trainers. So these are the results, and a number of recommendations have been issued. First of all, there is a need to review and harmonize the staff regulations with respect to the staff, using a global approach, in particular considering motivation, promotion, and compensation. There is also need for adopting national standards for trainers, a need to adopt the certification of skills, and to create a national system for initial and continuing training. The recommendations have been issued, and we have also to consider that something has been done. We have now common rules laid down in the new framework law. We have already a reference system which is underway when it comes to vocational training. In particular, 6 roles are involved in the development of these standards for training jobs. Next slide. Here you see how the recommendations and the results have been used and exploited. The standards, for example, are used for the skills assessment, to develop training plans for teaching and administrative staff. And also these standards are used by the National Training Institute, which is the last point in the implementation column. So this is the first time in Morocco. So a National Training Institute for trainers and tutors has been established. And this institute is also in charge of research. The institute is being established at the moment. So as soon as we are ready, the staff will be recruited, in particular for next year. Here in this slide, you see some details about the role of the newly established institute. So the missions, in particular, you see training for tutors, continuous training for trainers, training for different categories of staff, training, design, innovation, research, and in particular, some important role about digitalization and distance learning. Now, this is it. I give the floor to my colleague for the second part of the presentation. Of course, I'm here available to answer to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laila.
And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to participate to a webinar. This is the second time, and I would like to present the process for assessing trainers at the OFPPT. The OFPPT, which has been presented by the previous speaker. First of all, let me tell you something about CDC, so the Skills Development Centers. These centers have been created in 2004, and the centers are there to support trainers. In particular, we have a general CDC, and I'm responsible for this one. This CDC has a director, and I'm the director, and also trainers and facilitators. So in all CDCs, we have a director and trainers and facilitators. And in particular, they are responsible for supporting trainers when it comes to pedagogics and soft skills as well. Based on assessment, we also offer an upgrading of training to the trainers. So the assessment is one of the missions of the OFPPT. Can we move to next? Over to the previous slide, please. I'm still at the previous slide. Thank you. So the assessment of the trainers is one of the missions of the OFPPT. Tools are needed depending on the type of assessment to be carried out. Okay, next slide. So first of all, there is a placement test, so an initial test, and also a, let's say, assessment which is done during the career of the trainer. So first of all, what we call the placement test. So this is done at the beginning of the training to assess the prerequisites of the trainers. Then we have a second assessment during the trainer to see what trainers have learned. And then we have also satisfaction survey so that the trainers, facilitators can assess the feedback of the trainers about the training. Then there is another assessment for the professional competence of the trainer. So we assess the performance, and once a year, the skills audit is carried out, and based on that, the trainer can actually get access to a different level or a specialty. And actually, the annual appraisal is carried out by the directors of the vocational training institution. And the assessment is done at the end of every year of training, and the results are communicated to the trainers. Now, let's have a look at the skills audit. Well, this type of assessment is aimed at identifying the need for further training, and also the need expressed by the trainers or the bosses, or for trainers' specialization, redeployment, or reclassification. So for example, some trainers could move to a different level, for example, from technician to a specialized technician. And actually, this is done also in terms of restructuring the training offered and the technology used. The CDC establishes the schedule of the skills audit, and in particular, there is a weekly or monthly meeting of participants, except in case of intervention by an external operator. And the trainers, facilitators actually are subjected to these audits, and the audit is carried out by using the resources of the OFPPT, or sometimes external experts, which means professionals or equipment manufacturers, software providers, or even national or international consultants. In terms of digital transformation, and also in order to follow these new dynamics, well, the OFPPT offers mechanisms for assessing the trainers, in particular implementing specific distance assessment programs. In this case, this is new, something new, and this refers to the assessment of the digitization. So of course, it was quite difficult to sum up all our experience in just a few minutes, but of course, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you, Leila. Zainab? During the pandemic, actually, a survey has been carried out about the capacity of trainers to adapt to distance remote training, and the results of the survey is available in French and English on OpenSpace. So if you're interested about these assessments, you can actually have access to the survey.
Thank you very much, Rakia, Laila, and Zainab. And I would like to once again reassure all the participants that you will find all the materials, including the presentation, on ETF OpenSpace, and we will share the link to the materials with you after the webinar. Now I would like to turn to our audience, because we have heard about two different examples of how different types of assessment of teachers and trainers are used to define professional development and the needs for capacity building, but also, for example, for teachers' motivational purposes. So we would now like to ask you, dear participants, about your countries or your education providers' practice in using the mechanisms of assessment of teachers and trainers. So we are proposing to do a quick poll that you will now see on the screen. You will see the questions, the 3 questions, so please respond to them. The questions are, do you conduct regular assessment of teachers and trainers' performance? If yes, are the results of the assessment shared with them? And are the results of assessment used to act on identified needs? So let's wait a few seconds to allow everyone to respond, and then we will share the results of the poll. A few more seconds. Okay, so colleagues, continue to respond. So we will see what the situation is in your countries. Okay, I think we can share the results now. Okay, now I think you can see the results on your screens. So on the question if the regular assessment of teachers is conducted in your countries or schools, 69% responded yes, and If the results are shared with the teachers, 63% responded yes. While on the question, if the results are used to act on identified needs, 50% responded yes, and 44% not always, while 6% said definitely no. So I think these are very interesting results and definitely needing further discussion. And actually very timely, I'm now opening the floor to another discussion session. So you can use the chat to post your questions and comments, or maybe share your experiences or reflections. I would now like to ask Munir if we have any questions. I think we have some from our French-speaking participants.
Yes, there is one question on the from the presentation of Leila. It says that there is, I think, 50% of the trainers are not permanent trainers, and there is 40% or more are in the private sector. So are these trainers assessed on the same way, with the same tools, are the permanent trainers, or are there any specific issues when it comes to assessing those non-permanent, you call them vacataire trainers?
Donc, pour le système.
On vous entend pas, madame.
We cannot hear you. The mic is off. We cannot hear you.
Le son est coupé.
We cannot hear you.
Yes.
Donc, pour le secteur privé, il est...
For the private sector and public sector are treated the same way. It is exactly the same thing. So for trainers, both from the private and public sector, the follow-up operations and assessments are done for both, so private and private sectors, in the same way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laila. Munir, I'm asking you if we have any other questions in French. Your mic, Munir.
There was a very specific question asked by, of course, our friend in Tunisia, Faisal. So I will read the question. It's in French, so I'll read it in French. And la question est adressée à Madame Laila. Alors, Faisal vous demande la chose suivante.
So the question is the following. Do you think that having the assessment of trainers only at central level, is it sufficient or not? And secondly, do you think about external assessments, or what about pedagogical inspection? And CDCs are in charge of assessing public trainers, but what about trainers in the private sector? The training department is also in charge of assessing trainers from the private sector. Yes, I can say that the assessment is not, let's say, enough for the, I mean, the follow-up and assessment is not enough, but the monitoring gives information about the situation of trainers, but then the department carries out surveys in order to evaluate, to assess the trainers. However, as I said, the newly established institute will be in charge of assessing trainers and general standards and reference systems will be used. So the reference system has been defined by the people responsible for vocational training. So there is actually a national recognition of standards which will be adopted for the assessment of trainers and trainers' skills. And the newly established institute will be in charge of that on the basis of such a national reference system, so system of standards. And in particular, also in the private sector, all of this will be, let's say, adopted. So the national body actually will work also for the private sector as well.
Merci infiniment, Madame Laila. On reviendra.
Thank you. I think that in 2 years' time, we will come back to you to hear more about these newly established institutes and how is going.
Savoir si l'ONIRA est toujours certificateur ou pas.
We will, yes, we will come back in a couple of years and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you again, Laila and our Moroccan colleagues. And now I would like to pass the floor back to Munir for his concluding remarks and wrap up.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thank you very much for all the colleagues from Morocco, Zainab, Burqaya, Leila, and as well Dana from Romania. Thank you very much for sharing with us your views and your systems and being open to share the challenges as well you are facing. I would like as well to thank all the participants for their participation. We have very high numbers today. We were not expecting so many participants, but it's good. The theme is interesting, and maybe we'll come back to that in the future. From this webinar, I would have what we call 3 takeaways. The first one is from the Moroccan experience, which is about the occupational standards of trainer. I think this is very important that within a system, we have these standards that we all agree about and all which describes actually what you expect from trainer. And this is the basic, actually the basis to design an assessment. If we don't agree on the job, how we can design an assessment. So it is very important to have this occupational standard for teacher. And I know that in many countries, this description of the job profile and job of teacher or trainer is missing. The second takeaway from Romania is about the combination of self-assessment and external assessment. I know it's sometimes hard to do a self-assessment and to think about your own performance, but as well, it is a very formative exercise because then you think about what you have been doing, how have you been doing, were you performing well? And if you combine that with an external assessment, this would give you a way and thinking on where to improve and how to improve that. And the third takeaway, again from Romania, is that the self-assessment of the assessment of teachers' performance is part of a whole quality assurance system. So it's not a piece of activity here and there, but it fits in within whole quality assurance system that both support that assessment and as well use the results of the assessment to continuously improve the system. So these are my final remarks on the webinar. Thank you very much, and back to you, Nadia, to inform about our upcoming events. Thank you.
Thank you, Munir. And once again, I would like to invite all the participants to continue this discussion on this very important topic, and maybe to share your experience on the ETF open space. So please join us on this ETF open platform. And at this point, so on behalf of ETF, I'm thanking everyone, all the speakers, all the participants, organizers, interpreters, and the ETF team for today's webinar. I would like to remind the participants that you will receive the link to the feedback form that we are kindly asking you to fill in. So once again, thank you, and goodbye. We will see you in our next webinars, and please stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. Au revoir, merci. Ciao.
Bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
طلعت على باي باي سامح لك